she actually has not necessarily told the full truth about her age. I think she's actually a lot older.
That runs through her life is she's blowing up families. I mean, she seems like she's really caused a lot of problems in her husband's family.
What if one of the most carefully constructed celebrity timelines in modern history has a crack in it that nobody was supposed to find? Not from leaked palace documents, not from tabloid investigations, but from a printed magazine sitting in an archive, frozen in time, with a number next to a name that changes everything. This story has been quietly building for years now, and every time someone tries to close the book on it, another detail surfaces that pulls it wide open again. We're talking about Meghan Markle, and a question that her own family has been raising long before the rest of the world started paying attention. The question is deceptively simple. How old is she really? Now, before you wave this off as just family drama or tabloid noise, hear this out, because the layers here go much deeper than most people realize. And the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to look at the official story the same way. For years, Samantha Markle has been one of the most publicly dismissed voices in this entire saga. She was labeled bitter, jealous, attention-seeking. Every time she opened her mouth, the narrative machine cranked into gear and painted her as someone not worth listening to. And honestly, for a long time, most people bought that framing without question. But here's what's interesting. Over time, details she raised early on have started lining up with things other people independently noticed. Even investigative journalist Tom Bauer, who spent months digging into Meghan's background for his book, reportedly acknowledged that much of what Samantha had been saying turned out to hold weight. That's not a small thing. When a respected journalist essentially says the person everyone laughed at was actually ahead of the curve, it shifts the dynamic considerably. So what exactly has Samantha been pointing to? It starts with memories. She remembers growing up alongside Meghan. She remembers specific moments, ages, milestones, and events tied to particular years. And when she compares those memories to the version of Meghan's life that the public has been presented with, she says the math doesn't work. Not in a dramatic, world-shattering way, but in a persistent, nagging way that refuses to resolve itself no matter how many times she revisits it. She's described the process almost like assembling a jigsaw puzzle where a few pieces clearly belong to a different box. The edges don't match, the colors are slightly off, and no matter how hard you press them into place, they never quite sit right. Then Thomas Markle entered the conversation with his own perspective, and suddenly this wasn't just one sibling with a grudge. This was a father who had spent decades documenting his family's life through photographs, holiday cards, keepsakes, and personal records. Thomas didn't come forward swinging accusations. By most accounts, he came forward confused. He remembered things, specific things, a graduation outfit, a birthday dinner at a particular restaurant, the handwriting on a Christmas card with a year printed clearly on it. These weren't fuzzy, half-remembered impressions from 30 years ago. These were anchored to tangible objects and distinct occasions. And when he placed those memories next to the polished, streamlined biography being circulated in major publications, he felt a disconnect. Not enormous, not absurd, but present, consistently present. The kind of gap that makes you double-check your own memory at first, and then makes you double-check the official record when your memory keeps holding firm. Now here's where things escalated in a way that caught a lot of people off guard. An archived copy of 17 magazine from March 1997 began circulating online. Inside that issue, there was a feature that included someone identified as Meghan Markle from Los Angeles. Standard enough, but the age listed beside her name was 21. Not 15, not 16, 21. Let that settle for a moment. If Meghan was born in August 1981, as her official biography states, she would have been 15 years old when that magazine went to print. Being listed as 21 would represent a 6-year discrepancy, and this wasn't a social media post that could be edited or a Wikipedia entry that could be corrected. This was printed ink on a physical page, distributed nationally and archived in collections that still exist. Could it have been a typo? Absolutely. Could there have been a mix-up with another person? That's possible too, but when you factor in the name, the city, and the context, dismissing it outright becomes harder than it should be. And for people who had already been quietly questioning the timeline, this felt like the first piece of external, non-family evidence that supported what Samantha and Thomas had been saying all along. The conversation around this magazine detail spread quickly, and not just among casual gossip circles. People who study public records, archival materials, and biographical inconsistencies started weighing in. The consensus wasn't that this single detail proved anything definitively. The consensus was that it deserved more scrutiny than it received. And this is where the story branches into something much larger than just a birth year. Because if the timeline is even slightly different from what's been publicly accepted, it doesn't just change a number on a page. It recontextualizes major life events that the entire world watched unfold in real time. Consider the pregnancy announcements. When Meghan's first pregnancy was revealed, the coverage was wall-to-wall celebration. Every detail was presented as perfectly timed, beautifully managed, and completely in line with what you'd expect from a healthy woman in her late 30s. The images were radiant, the appearances were controlled and confident. Everything flowed with an almost cinematic precision that felt too smooth to question. But some medical professionals and attentive observers started doing their own calculations. If the alternative age perspective held any truth, and Meghan was actually several years older than publicly stated, her pregnancies would have occurred in her early 40s rather than her late 30s. That distinction matters significantly from a medical standpoint. Pregnancies at that stage typically involve heightened monitoring, additional precautions, and a recovery process that doesn't usually look effortless from the outside. Yet every public appearance suggested a seamless, complication-free experience from start to finish. Then came the details from Prince Harry's own memoir, and this is where the timeline questions took on an entirely new dimension. Harry described the birth experience in deeply personal terms. Soft lighting, calming music, a serene atmosphere where everything unfolded peacefully and without disruption. It reads beautifully as prose, but when people with medical backgrounds examined the sequence of events he described, particularly the recovery timeline and the speed of departure from the hospital, several noted that the account felt unusually compressed. Standard post-delivery protocols, especially at high-end London facilities, involve a structured observation period. Patients who receive anesthesia are monitored carefully before being cleared to leave. Newborns undergo a series of checks. Paperwork is processed. Transportation from a secure central London hospital requires coordination, particularly for high-profile individuals with security considerations. When you map all of those steps onto the timeline Harry described, the window feels remarkably tight. Not impossible, but tight enough that it stands out to people familiar with how these processes typically work. Some interpreted this as Harry simply condensing events for narrative flow. Others saw it as another instance where the story being told seemed to prioritize emotional impact over procedural accuracy. And when you place that observation alongside the broader timeline questions, it becomes part of a pattern rather than an isolated moment. This pattern is really what drives the ongoing conversation. No single detail on its own rewrites the story. The magazine listing could be an error, the family memories could be imperfect, the birth timeline could simply reflect efficient medical care and strong privacy management. Each piece examined in isolation has a reasonable explanation, but when you lay them all out together side by side, a picture starts forming that at minimum raises legitimate questions about how much of the public narrative has been curated versus how much reflects unfiltered reality. And this brings us to the broader point that extends far beyond any one individual. In the age of carefully managed public personas, the line between authentic storytelling and strategic image construction has become almost invisible. Celebrities, public figures, and anyone operating under sustained media attention understand that perception is everything. The story you tell about yourself becomes the story the world accepts, and once that story takes root, challenging it requires extraordinary evidence and even more extraordinary persistence. Samantha Markle, whatever anyone thinks of her motivations, has demonstrated that persistence for years. She has maintained a consistent position while being publicly ridiculed for it. She hasn't dramatically shifted her claims or escalated them for attention. She's essentially been saying the same thing from the beginning, that certain details about her sister's publicly presented life don't match what she personally witnessed and remembers. Whether that makes her credible or simply stubborn depends entirely on who you ask. But the consistency itself is notable. Thomas Markle's contributions add another layer because they come from a different vantage point. While Samantha's perspective is shaped by being a sibling with a complicated relationship, Thomas occupied the role of primary caretaker for significant portions of Meghan's childhood. His memories aren't peripheral, they're central to the story itself. And when a father says the timeline of his own daughter's life doesn't fully match what he's seeing in print, that carries a weight that's difficult to entirely dismiss regardless of the family dynamics involved. What makes this entire discussion so fascinating isn't really about whether Meghan Markle is 37 or 43 at any given moment. What we can observe with clarity is that the conversation hasn't died. Despite years of dismissal, despite media pressure to move on, despite the overwhelming dominance of the official narrative, the questions keep resurfacing. They come from different angles, through different people, and at different times, but they consistently circle back to the same core tension. Two versions of the same life exist simultaneously, and they don't fully agree with each other. At some point, that tension either gets resolved through verifiable evidence that settles things conclusively, or it simply continues to exist as one of those unresolved chapters that follows a public figure indefinitely. History is full of both outcomes. Some mysteries get answered, others just become permanent footnotes that people revisit every few years with fresh eyes and slightly different perspectives. What's clear is that dismissing the questions entirely has become harder over time, not easier. And that shift, slow and gradual as it has been, might end up being the most significant part of this entire story. Not the answer itself, but the fact that the question refused to go away no matter how aggressively it was pushed aside. Whether you find any of this compelling or completely unconvincing, the underlying lesson applies universally. In a world where public image can be constructed, maintained, and defended with professional precision, the most powerful thing an ordinary person can do is simply keep asking questions. Not with hostility, not with certainty, just with genuine curiosity and a willingness to look at the full picture rather than the framed version hanging on the wall.